Hello everybody and welcome to SpaceWeek Live for Sunday, June 6th, 2021. I'd like to welcome you all here and let's get started. Alright, so if you have, as always, this is a live Q&A session, so if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask them in the chat. Just make sure to tag my name, rawspace, or @rawspace, so that we're sure to see them, and we'll compile the questions and I'll get to them after the news. So, looking at the last week, Canadarm2, the second generation advanced space station robotic arm that we've grown to know and love these past 20-odd years, has been hit by orbital debris. The arm still works fine, and I think I read that the debris hit was actually back in February, but it just made the news this past week. You can see the hole there. It did not appear to damage any of the functionality of the arm. It didn't cripple the arm or affect its functioning in any way. It appears to have been what they call a lucky strike. So it got hit with something, but you know, the damage was superficial. Now, orbital debris is a real hazard up there, and you know, we have agencies and systems in place to monitor everything that we can that's floating around in orbit, down to a size of maybe a centimeter or less. But there are, the smaller the size of the orbital object, the more there are. So there are maybe a couple of million, very, very small pieces of debris up there, and a few thousand, pieces of sizable debris. Now, if it's if an impact is predicted by NORAD or whomever is keeping track of this stuff, the ISS can actually maneuver out of the way using. They would probably use one of the attached Progress supply ship to boost the station out of the way. Plus, they have their own thrusters on the station. But in this case, even though the Canadarm2 is only a few inches in diameter, it was hit and it is fine. So I don't know if they're going to need to do a mission to patch up that protective padding on Canadarm or not. I haven't read anything one way or the other on that, but Canadarm is A-OK. Let's see. SpaceX has struck a partnership with Axiom Space to fly 4 commercial astronaut missions to the ISS starting in January of 2022. Now, there have been commercial passengers to space and to the ISS previously, flying aboard Soyuz spacecraft, courtesy of Russia and, what's the name of that company? It's a company that's been flying millionaires, basically, to space for a long time. There have been a few that have flown, but never before has there been a manned commercial mission where the entire mission is a private commercial endeavor, rather than simply having, rather than being an official mission with a commercial passenger. Now, veteran astronaut Peggy Whitson has been pegged, as it were, as the commander and pilot for the AX-2 mission, which is pretty cool. But yeah, so they'll have an expert on board, but the 3 passengers they will receive astronaut training with SpaceX and NASA, but they are not going to be NASA astronauts per se. As for launches and live streams this past week, on Wednesday, Russian cosmonauts Oleg Novitsky and Pyotr Dubrov did a 7-hour, 19-minute spacewalk, the second in a series of spacewalks to prepare the Pirs airlock module for decommissioning. Now, Pirs was launched almost 20 years ago on September 14th, 2001, just 3 days after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. It's scheduled to be detached and deorbited using the Progress MS-16 supply craft, which has been docked to the station since February. Pirs will be replaced by Nauka, also called the MLM, or Multi-Purpose Laboratory Module, which is scheduled for launch on a Russian Proton rocket, also on July 15th. The detaching and deorbiting of Progress Pirs using Progress is scheduled for July 15th as well. Now, Nauka was originally supposed to fly in 2007, 14 years ago, but it's been delayed and delayed repeatedly for a variety of reasons. It was delayed for so long, in fact, that last year its warranty expired before it even launched, and Roscosmos chief Dmitry Rogozin recalled Nauka back to Moscow for further testing and recertification. Now, back on the station, Novitsky and Dubrov removed docking antennas, cables, EVA gap spanners, external experiments, and the Strela crane arm, it's a robotic arm similar to Canadarm, but less fancy, from the Pirs module, moving them over to Poisk. They also replaced an old fluid flow regulator unit on Zarya, manually hurling the old canister aftward behind the space station to ensure that it could not come back around and pose an impact hazard. Now, they lost video at the moment of the release, so we didn't get to see the cosmonaut actually throwing the thing off into the distance, but there it is floating away. Now, that apparently wasn't the only thing they discarded. Sharp-eyed viewer and regular chatter, Ken and Lucas, noticed what appears to be a tool flying away from where the cosmonauts were working. If you look on the right side of the screen here.
With about 3 tons of food, fuel, and supplies for the Expedition 65 crew.
The other folks.
So you can see it flipping away. Now, normally, like when U.S., European, and Japanese astronauts are doing an EVA, their tools are all tethered with these RET cords, these retractable extension tethers, I think is what it stands for. Basically, these cords that tether everything to, you know, the tool bag, basically, so that tools can't float away. But whatever that was, hopefully it doesn't pose a problem in the future. It shouldn't, because while the ISS receives periodic boosts to maintain its orbital altitude as it gets slowed down gradually over time by atmospheric stray molecules of air from the atmosphere that interact with the ISS structure. The tools and other debris that are dropped off the station like that, they do not get boosts. So they'll basically fall behind and deorbit on their own. Let's see. They had planned to clean up the windows, or rather to clean the windows on the Russian modules and inspect Zvezda for leaks, but due to getting a late start and some issues they had with a pressurized container hatch, those tasks will have to wait for the next spacewalk. Also on Wednesday, a Chinese Long March 3B launched the Fengyun 4B geostationary meteorological satellite. Someday I want to look into the engineering reasons or the physics reasons why so many rockets, particularly the Soyuz and Chinese rockets that are that are adapted from Russian designs, have boosters, side boosters that thrust at an angle. They don't thrust straight down. They thrust at an angle, like they're pushing toward the center of the booster. I don't know if that's to add stability or what, but I'd like to look into that sometime. Not being an orbital, a rocket scientist myself, or a rocket engineer, I should say. Tripplefives, welcome and thank you for joining as a member. Okay. Moving right along, on Thursday, SpaceX launched Cargo Dragon CRS-22 to the ISS on a Falcon 9 rocket.
Way for liftoff.
Stage 1, press for flight.
T-minus 15 seconds.
Falcon 9 is configured for flight.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff.
And liftoff of the 22nd SpaceX cargo resupply mission, bringing new solar arrays to the International Space Station.
Now, after stage separation, SpaceX did something different. Different than usual, I should say. The first stage flipped around and did a boost back burn, which we see here.
And meet go.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
Stage 1 boost back startup.
So successful Merlin vacuum engine startup.
Pretty awesome footage there. Now, boost back burns use extra fuel, and historically they've been used so that the booster could come back to land on the pad at Cape Canaveral. But this time it landed on the drone ship, which puzzled me. Now, for most drone ship landings, boosters have followed a simple ballistic trajectory, and they land further downrange. My first guess as to why they used a boost back burn for a drone ship landing was so that they could land closer to shore, thus limiting the risk to the booster from being transported long distances over the ocean. I did some reading, though, and learned of another reason for a boost back burn that seems obvious now in retrospect. It slows down the booster, thus reducing the wear and tear of re-entry and prolonging the booster's life. So there you go. A couple potential reasons, and the second one being a very straightforward and practical reason to use a boost back burn if they have the available fuel, and that is that it prolongs the life of the booster. Then we got some sweet, uninterrupted views of the landing from the rocket cam. Check this out.
So the next major event coming up is that landing burn. Landing burn is what will bring the vehicle speed rapidly down to 0. Amazing shots of the first stage during re-entry. Once we get closer to the drone ship, we will deploy our 4 symmetric landing legs around the base of the first stage for hopefully a nice soft touchdown on that drone ship. You can see a shot of that on the right-hand side of your screen.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
Picture perfect landing.
A little bit of asynchronization between the rocket cam and the drone ship cam, but yeah, great views there. Then 2 days, 3.5 hours later, Cargo Dragon autonomously docked itself to the space station. In addition to the usual hardware, supplies, and experiments, CRS-22 delivered the first pair of ISS rollout solar arrays, or IROSAs, that will be installed on top of the station's existing solar arrays during a series of spacewalks, the first of which is scheduled for next Wednesday, or 2 Wednesdays from now, June 16th. Clouds in the background looking like wool, like a big sheep, a planetary sheep. Then last night, let's see here if I can get my window straight. Last night, SpaceX launched SXM-8. Let me start again. SXM-8 for Sirius XM satellite radio, releasing it into a geosynchronous transfer orbit. Let's check out the launch.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition and liftoff.
Stage 1 chamber pressures are nominal.
And here's the landing. Not quite as epic as the other one, but still successful.
Sounds like the landing burn has begun on first stage. You can see...
Expected loss of signal. Cape.
Sounds like we also got a good orbit on the second stage.
Insertion. Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
And we have touchdown of Falcon 9. Falcon 9 has
Stage 1 landing confirmed.
just landed on our drone ship. Just read the instructions. Today marks the 87th overall successful recovery of an orbital class rocket.
Very good. Congratulations once again to SpaceX. Okay. Now the SXM-8 satellite will circularize its orbit. So it was released into a geosynchronous transfer orbit, but it'll circularize its orbit by itself once it reaches its apogee at the geostationary orbital distance of 22,236 miles, or 35,786 kilometers. That's the orbital distance at which the orbital period of an object exactly matches the rotational period of the planet. So that's how geostationary satellites are able to quote-unquote hover over a given spot on the ground, and that is that they orbit in the exact same amount of time, 24 hours, that it takes the Earth to rotate. 24 hours and however many seconds or whatever, fractions of a second. Any orbits that are lower will orbit faster than the Earth rotates, and any orbits that are farther away will orbit slower than the Earth rotates. Now, looking ahead to this week, there actually aren't any launches on the schedule yet. But on Thursday, the new moon will line up perfectly. That's literally the new moon, as opposed to the full moon, will line up perfectly with the sun, causing an annular solar eclipse. The so-called Ring of Fire will be visible in parts of eastern Canada, Greenland, and Russia between 5:49 a.m. and 7:33 a.m. Eastern Time, or 9:49 and 11:33 GMT. Here's an animation from timeanddate.com showing the path of the eclipse. The small red oval is where the Ring of Fire, the annular version of totality, did you play? Will be visible. And it gets so stretched at the top of the map because of the equirectangular map projection that's used here. Let's play that again. Bloop. So, not a ton of people will get to see the annular eclipse, but those that do will surely enjoy it. Now, during an annular eclipse, if you're not familiar, you can have partial solar eclipses, total solar eclipses, where the entire surface of the sun is covered, and annular solar eclipses. Now, if you don't already know, the moon's distance from the Earth is not constant. That is because all orbits of moons around planets, planets around suns, suns around the galactic center, all orbits are elliptical. They are not perfectly circular. Even the Earth's orbit around the sun is elliptical. During part of our orbit, we're a little bit closer to the sun than the other part of our orbit. So the moon's distance from the Earth varies by about 10%. And so that's why if you've heard the term supermoon, that's referring to a full moon that happens when the moon is at its periapsis or perigee. Perigee refers specifically to an orbit around the Earth. Periapsis is the generic term for an object orbiting another object. But periapsis is when it's closest to Earth. Apoapsis or apogee is when it's farthest from Earth. So when the moon is full at its periapsis, that's called a supermoon. So when a total solar eclipse happens, if the moon is closer to its periapsis or its perigee, its apoapsis or apogee, so that it's farther away from the Earth, then the moon doesn't quite cover the full disk of the sun, the apparent circular disk that we see of the sun. Therefore, you get this ring of fire effect, where there's the black moon in the center, surrounded by a ring of sun around the periphery of the moon. Now, unfortunately, an annular solar eclipse does not allow you to see the corona or prominent solar prominences or any of the stuff that a total solar eclipse does, because we still are seeing a ring of the sun's exceptionally bright photosphere around the moon. Only during a total solar eclipse do you get to see the corona and the solar prominences. So to the individual spamming that I'm the best channel, thank you, but please don't overuse the emojis. Okay. Let's see. Now, okay, I'm already full screen. Okay, that's the eclipse. This is really the only event this week. So I would like to take a moment to thank and welcome our new channel members. We have Lina Wek, Reski Awan, Jessica Love, André, Jean-Pierre, Hilger-Gierens, if I pronounced that correctly, and just a few minutes ago, tripplefives. Welcome to channel membership, and you know, you'll get to use custom emojis, get your name in green, get a membership badge, and the other perks that go along with channel membership. So thank you. Your support is much appreciated. Now let me get to your questions. Let's see if we have questions today. Okay. I'm going to have to scan through the chat real quick to look for questions. Maybe I should hum or something to pass the time while I'm looking at the chat. André Esterhuizen, if I pronounced that correctly. Why sending so many rockets? So it does seem like there's an awful lot of rockets launching lately, and that is because we live in an increasingly connected world full of services. Services like GPS and communications and weather monitoring and surveillance and radio and broadband internet. I mean, I myself have SpaceX Starlink satellite internet beta service at home that I am testing, or using. Basically, I use it on my phone. I could use it for my desktop computer, but it's not quite, like, they don't have quite enough satellites up there to make it reliable enough for real-time gaming, because you'll get dropouts and lag occasionally, which sucks if you're playing a game, or for streaming, which requires a lot of upload speed, and also you don't want dropouts when you're streaming. But it's getting there, and yeah. So I have SpaceX Starlink internet, and most of the time it works great. I don't notice any difference from my landline internet provider, which is actually Google Fiber. But it's interesting. Curious. I just noticed a weird, inexplicable dip in the viewer numbers. This was what, 10 minutes ago. It dropped from 213 down to 46, and then jumped back up to 162. I think that was a glitch on the part of YouTube's reporting. In any case, oh, there it goes. It just fixed itself. All right, thanks, Google. I mean, YouTube. But we have so many launches because the world demands services. And as technology increases and we grow more accustomed to having, things like accurate weather predictions and scientific analysis of climate change and detailed images of the entire surface of the Earth, et cetera, we need satellites up there to do that for us. So, and especially like SpaceX, they wouldn't have, I mean, they are a prolific launch provider, and they were even before they started launching Starlink satellites. But since they started with the Starlink program a couple of years ago, back in 2019, they've just been sort of oozing Starlink satellites all over the place. Starlink is now like 3 or 4 times as many as the next biggest satellite constellation. But moving on, space community. Can objects that hit the ISS come from space, for example, from comet debris? They can come from anywhere. There is debris in space that is, there's debris in orbit around the Earth that is natural, and there's also a lot of debris that is man-made, from either satellites that have had parts fall off of them or that have suffered impacts, and even sometimes deliberate satellite demolitions like China and India did a few years ago that caused all sorts of fuss because they generated a cloud of thousands of pieces of debris that saturates the orbit and threatens other satellites. But there are also small rocks, pebbles, would-be meteorites or whatever that get captured by Earth's gravity and become sort of moons of the Earth, if you will. Even things that aren't in orbit, that just fly in from outer space and get dragged in by the Earth but aren't actually orbiting the Earth. They can, whether it's micrometeoroids or bigger objects, or debris in orbit can come from anywhere. Now, space is really big, much bigger than people tend to realize, and the chances of any given object suffering a damaging orbital debris strike is pretty low. Canadarm2 has been flying up there for 20 years, and it's fine. And even this puncture that it suffered didn't damage it. It didn't. It poked a hole in the, at least the superficially, but it didn't actually damage the functionality of the thing. So yes, debris is something that needs to be monitored and managed and mitigated, but it's not. We're not suffering from Kessler syndrome where orbit is unsustainable. Attribution is asking, I can't find the Axiom module for ISS launch anywhere in schedules. How are they ferrying up tourists before the module? I have not had the opportunity to delve too deeply into the Axiom mission, but I'm sure I'll have some more information for you on that in a later episode. As far as where the commercial astronauts, the private spacefarers, will be sleeping, what they'll be doing, etc. Mark Desert, moderator extraordinaire, says, it's weird how you can throw something away in orbit and it will just keep following you. That's, of course, because there is essentially no air up there. There are a few stray molecules, but it's still a harder vacuum up there than we are able to produce down here, or at least easily so. So there's nothing to, an object in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. So even if you throw the screwdriver away from you, or the fuel filter module or whatever, it's going to keep going at orbital velocity minus a few miles per hour at which you throw it. Attribution says micrometeorite hits are normal and the ISS is hardened to account for those. Yes, they have protective blankets covering some parts of the ISS, as well as the metal structure of the ISS itself is quite able to absorb the usual micrometeoroid impacts that happen up there. Scanning for more questions. Here, I'll give you some music to listen to while I look for questions. There's not too many more. Not a lot of questions today. Tripplefives says he wonders how much trouble he would get into if he launched his own microsatellite. That depends on from where you launched it, and whether you had cleared the launch with the appropriate authority, the FAA in the case of the United States, or whatever governing body, wherever you launch it from. But I mean, like if you went to the middle of the ocean or something and you launched a microsatellite, I don't think there's really anything anybody could say, because no country owns space. Von Flappestein said most computers used in space are of an older design because they are better hardened against radiation. That's true. Modern electronics are so miniaturized that any cosmic ray hit or whatever, which are, atomic particles that are flying at high velocity through interstellar space, and they bombard us all the time. Our magnetosphere and our atmosphere protect us from most of them, but there are cosmic rays that still pass through us on the regular. One of those interacts with a microscopic electronic component, has a much greater chance of causing a problem than with a clunkier, less miniaturized electronic component. So modern electronics is actually worse suited for space than the old clunky stuff. Crystalline bacteria would love to hear a launch for real. So would I. So would I. Luis Castillo is asking to explain about Canadarm2 and the Russians. So Canadarm2 is the space station robotic arm. It's the second generation of Canadian robotic arm. The first one flew on the shuttle, which was Canadarm, and was developed in Canada, of course, and they are the the experts on the care and feeding of Canadarm2. No connection with Russia. Russia has their own Strela crane that they use on the Russian segment of the space station. It's, I think, much smaller and less multi-purpose than Canadarm2, but it does what it needs to do, moving, modules and other heavy things around the Russian segment. Kelvy Quayo, is there a debris hit? Is there video? There is not video of the debris hit, but there is a photograph of it that we saw earlier. Whoop. Chat just jumped. Esther's daughter, Long, asks, why doesn't NASA tell people about near-Earth asteroid? NASA's quite open about, well, first of all, NASA's not a typical news organization that is in the business of putting viewers' eyes in front of their content. That's why when you get news from most news outlets, it's going to be hyped up. It's going to be sensationalized. Some are worse than others, but, journalistic integrity is, in accurately and fairly reporting the news is sometimes takes a second seat to publishing something that's exciting, but not necessarily entirely accurate. NASA's in the business of publishing our best understanding of what is actually true. And so if there is a near-Earth asteroid that is going to pass close to Earth, then, you know, NASA or other equivalent body would say that there's a near-Earth asteroid that is going to pass close to Earth. You know, they're not going to say, OMG, the sky is falling, you know, run for the hills. It's an extinction level event or whatever. So a lot of times it looks like NASA is holding back when in fact they are waiting for more confirmation, or they're waiting for a more accurate trajectory projection, or they don't deem a particular item as being newsworthy because, you know, it's not going to be a problem or whatever. But I trust what NASA has to say 100 times more than any of your run-of-the-mill news outlets, because they very carefully vet everything that they publish so that they're not misleading people or you know, sensationalizing. Now, that's not to say they don't get excited. I mean, they get plenty excited about their missions and about what they've discovered. But, you know, like when they find blueberries on Mars. I mean, if you remember back to Opportunity, when it first found these little round spheres of something on the surface of Mars, it was like, what in the world are these things? And, you know, and they weren't excited because of life. I mean, they were excited because of the challenge of figuring out what these things might be. And, you know, and ultimately they determined them to be some sort of precipitate from what used to be a body of water, you know, either flowing or like a lake or something, in eons past on the Martian surface. We have similar structures here on Earth, but yeah. Wait for the good info, and you'll be better informed. Mark Desire, quoting SPJ, is it true the Starship will be able to carry 100 people? So the dimensions of Starship, I think, are different than the original plan, and I don't know anything about the interior, the proposed interior design of Starship, that like production Starship that will carry humans. I do know that it has an equivalent volume to the space station, but bear in mind that the space station is a series of tubes, not dissimilarly to the internet on which we're all watching this. But the space station is a series of you know, fairly narrow modules that are connected together in a long string, whereas the volume of Starship is going to be more along the lines of, you know, like Skylab, or which was made out of a Saturn V stage, that has a large single interior volume that can be, you know, configured in any number of ways rather than being a bunch of different things strung together. Mudbath, what causes most space debris? I don't have, like, remember what I just said about waiting for the good info? I mean, I don't like to speculate. You'll notice on my streams, I say very often, I don't know. And there's nothing wrong with not knowing. Not knowing is great because that gives you an opportunity to learn. That means there's something that you can discover. And I don't have a problem not knowing. And I don't have the statistics in front of me. I'm not even sure where I would find them on man-made orbital debris versus natural orbital debris, because, you know, the Earth does have stuff in orbit that is not man-made, but I think that my guess would be that the majority of orbital debris is man-made, because most things approaching Earth from the outside are not going to enter a nice, clean, almost circular orbit around the Earth. Most things approaching from the outside are either going to skip off and and enter a either skip off gravitationally and not enter Earth orbit at all, or they're going to burn up in the Earth's atmosphere, or they're going to enter some elongated elliptical orbit that's going to be unstable. Additionally, anything that enters low Earth orbit is not going to stay there for terribly long because of natural orbital decay from perturbations in gravitational perturbations, as well as the slowing effect of interaction with stray atmospheric molecules. So my guess, and this is a pretty strong guess, would be that the majority of debris in low Earth orbit is man-made in nature. But I can't say for sure because I don't have the actual official analysis in front of me. Movie Clips asks, hey, do you believe we can live on Mars? Sure. I mean, we can live in low Earth orbit for at least, a year and change in time. I mean, in duration. Now, Mars has less gravity than Earth, and it is not as easily resupplied as low Earth orbit is from Earth, where we can get, food or other supplies up there in a matter of days or hours sometimes. But it has a reasonable amount of gravity, and therefore and again, we need further study on this, but my guess would be that Martian gravity would be tough on the human body, because the human body is designed for 1 g of gravitational pull, not 0.6 or 0.3 or whatever I forget but it's quite a bit less gravity on Mars because it's a much less massive planet. But my guess would be that there would be health effects of long-term exposure to lower gravitational conditions that could be mitigated with, there are ways to mitigate that. I mean, you could even have an inverse conical spinning habitat on Mars, which would augment the natural gravity of Mars with sort of the centrifugal effect of like a rotating habitat. But it would need to be angled in such a way that you would basically be getting 1 g of effective pull on your body in an artificial environment. But even if we didn't do that, I think we could live on Mars for at least short periods of time, maybe a few years. We would just need a source of food or large shipments of food from Earth, but being able to grow their own food would be very helpful. Additionally, the plants would help to filter the atmosphere, filter the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and produce oxygen. Yeah, I think we can live on Mars. It'll just be a while before we get there, unfortunately. And I do hope that future generations don't say the same thing, that it's going to be a while before we get there. Eventually, I think we will get there, but Danny Toon, do you think that once someone figures out the oxygen space, that one day the world will be like Star Trek? I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. Do you mean the generation of oxygen, breathable oxygen in space? I mean, on the space station, they get their oxygen from a few different places. They get it from literal tanks of oxygen that are shipped to the station on cargo vessels. They get it from recycling of the air, carbon scrubbers that that or CO2 scrubbers that recycle the carbon dioxide and pull oxygen out of those molecules, as well as they actually ship a lot of the breathable oxygen to the space station in the form of liquid water, because H2O has an oxygen atom in every molecule that is packed much more densely than gaseous oxygen O2 would be. So they actually, through electrolysis, they can extract that oxygen atom, and then I think they just vent the hydrogen because they don't need it. But yeah. But as far as Star Trek, in order for us to be like Star Trek, we would need interstellar travel. And Star Trek accomplishes this by whiz-bang, faster-than-light gimmickry or future technology that may or may not be anywhere within the realm of physical possibility. We don't have anything like that. I mean, our best rockets are our best production rockets are chemical, and and chemical fuel is very heavy. That's why to land 2 men on the moon, we needed a 360 some foot tall Saturn V rocket, because of all the fuel, to get out of Earth's gravity well. So we have ion thrusters that are electrically fired and produce a stream of ions that provide a minuscule amount of thrust, equivalent to resting a piece of paper on your hand. But those are good for modifying the orbits of satellites and spacecraft over periods of time, because you need a long time of thrusting with an ion thruster to get any substantial change in delta V, or substantial change in your trajectory or speed. But that's certainly not useful for interstellar travel. We have theoretical but possible within known current science methods of propulsion, like what was it called? What was it? Orion, or what was it? The Orion project, where they used atomic bombs to propel nuclear propulsion, which is very controversial, but potentially could provide a great deal of propulsion. But I don't think that's feasible as currently conceived. So basically, in order to be like Star Trek, we would need some future technology. We would need to find some way around the laws of physics, because with current technology, sure, we could get to Proxima Centauri, but it would take 50,000 years to get there. And by that time, your spaceship would be, would have decomposed into, a glob of atoms or whatever, and your crew would be long dead. We have, even our best equipment lasts for a few decades, or maybe even a few hundred years. The oldest structures on Earth are a few thousand years old, and they're falling apart. Now they're also subject to the ravages of the weather and the atmosphere and everything, but yeah, I love sci-fi. Sci-fi is awesome. It's very entertaining. It's very hopeful in nature. It looks toward a bright future for our species, but the pragmatist in me deep down feels that the sci-fi future that we like to watch on the big screen and the small screen may be a little beyond what our species is capable of, ever. I kind of hope not, but in order to get there, we will need a fundamental quantum leap in either our understanding of physics or our technology to enable that, because, 50,000 year trip to the next star ain't going to cut it. So that was very long-winded, but a topic that I obviously have some passion on. Xenoraptor asks, a little off topic, but it's not at all. But have you got your silver play button yet? So the silver play. So a few weeks ago, the channel reached the milestone of 100,000 subscribers. Thank you. But the silver play button is not a given, and it can't be asked for. It's sort of a don't call us, we'll call you sort of thing. So YouTube knows when a channel reaches a particular milestone, whether it's 100,000 or 1 million or 10 million, and they have to manually take a look at that channel and to determine whether they want to offer them a creator reward, like the silver play button. And until they extend that offer, there's diddly squat that I can do. I just have to keep my eye on the YouTube Studio, channel like dashboard page, and if I get an alert at the top that says, "Hey, you're eligible for a creator reward," then and if I don't get that, then I'm not going to get a silver play button. It's not something I can just order from the YouTube creator store. There's no such thing. So like, for example, if YouTube looked at my channel and they decided, well, his weekly shows are okay, but they're small potatoes compared with his launch streams, which are where most of the subscribers come from, and those are just regurgitated content from SpaceX and NASA, etc. So we don't want to reward that behavior, then that's it, So it's entirely up to YouTube. So YouTube, if you're listening, I would love to have a silver play button if you've got one to spare. YouTube is a useful platform, reaches a huge audience, and it's a lot of fun, but they are very much off limits to, like, you can't communicate with YouTube. There's no such thing as YouTube support. You might be able to get their attention on Twitter or something if you're lucky, but basically, yeah, if you have a need and it is not being met already, you're kind of out of luck in most cases. Crystalline bacteria, what fuel would be inside Mars? So the Martian atmosphere is almost entirely CO2 with some argon and other trace gases. But the vast majority of the Martian atmosphere is CO2, carbon dioxide. So you have carbon, which is not terribly useful. You have oxygen, which is useful. So the MOXIE experiment on board the Perseverance rover has been generating, pulling in Martian atmosphere and producing pure oxygen as a result. So carbon dioxide is 1 carbon, 2 oxygen. What MOXIE does is it takes the Martian atmosphere and it heats it up a lot to 1,500 degrees or something. And what it produces, basically it splits the molecules, the CO2 molecules apart, and what it gets is carbon monoxide and 1 lonely oxygen atom. The carbon monoxide is discarded, and the lonely oxygen atoms are stockpiled. And thus far, MOXIE has produced a few grams or micrograms of oxygen. So, but it's a proof of concept, and it was successful. So it could be scaled up to a more useful level where they could produce oxygen for oxidizer for fuel, as well as for breathing. Now, oxygen by itself is not a fuel. That's merely the oxidizer. You would still need some sort of fuel. such as methane or something like that, you know, that could be synthesized. What's the molecule for methane? It's a hydrocarbon. So it's got hydrogen, it's got carbon, and it's got oxygen. I don't remember the exact ratios, but now hydrogen, not sure where they'd get the hydrogen from. They do have carbon. I'm not sure about hydrogen. In any case, but the oxygen is easy. You just need to scale up what Moxie is doing. Space community, yes. SpaceX hopes to launch its next rockets through the Deimos spaceport, which is expected to be ready by next year. So Deimos is actually an oil rig platform that SpaceX is converting into an offshore launch platform. Pretty amazingly awesome. So it's an old oil rig that SpaceX is going to launch rockets from, Starship or whatever. Yes, that's very exciting. And the name Deimos, of course, the moons of Mars are Phobos and Deimos, or Deimos. And but the name Deimos also reminds me of the original computer game Doom, with the Deimos base, which is where Doom happened. But hopefully we get more Mars and less Doom. Crystallina bacteria, does Mars have a core? So Mars, I don't know as much about the core of Mars as I would like. It does not have the same, it doesn't have, like, it does have a molten core, I believe, but it is not a molten iron core spinning in the same fashion as Earth's does, because Mars does not have a global magnetosphere like Earth does. So I'd have to read up on the internal structure of Mars as best we know. You know, we have limited insight into the internal workings of other planets, less so than our own. Scanning for more questions. Daniel C. Star saying here, kitty, kitty, kitty. All right, so I'm going to pause the questions for a moment and do some show and tell. So, as you know, let's see if I can type correctly. As you know, the channel has merchandise, which I don't plug too much, but and it, you know, which is fine because it doesn't sell much. But but if you are interested in merchandise, we do have some that are fun and interesting. There are 3 designs currently on the merch site. There's the yin yang planets, which you see all over the place. That's kind of my signature symbol. It's not the official logo of the channel, but it's kind of my unofficial symbol forevermore, because I just love it. And that's what I get on most of my sample merchandise, is the yin yang planets, because I think it's sort of the most universally appealing. The second design is the raw ball, or the raw space worm ball logo, that I'm actually wearing a NASA shirt today, but the raw space looks similar to this, but it says raw on it in the sort of NASA worm logo font. And then the third design is the meat in space, or the space steak, which it's just a design I came up with that I thought was funny. It's a floating pixelated raw steak in space, because I'm raw space steak in space. But anyway, the reason why I mentioned merch is because Teespring periodically offers new products, and they got some cool stuff that I want to show you. that I got samples of, and the samples have arrived. So they have, let's see if I can, so they have this small zippered bag that has the yin-yang planets on it. It's about 5 inches by 8.5 inches, about that much. It's made of durable canvas-like material. It has this enormous tag inside that I'm definitely going to be cutting off. It looks like a CVS receipt. But yeah, so I got a sample of that bag, and the the zipper is manufactured by YKK, the famous Chinese zipper company that makes most of the zippers in the world. And we've got a beach towel. Look at this. Oops, if I can find it. So, wow, it's so big. All right. We have a beach towel that's beach towel sized. It's not terribly thick. It's a fairly thin material, but it seems durable and it looks great. It's quite large. So that'd surely dry you off. And then the pièce de résistance, if I pronounce that right, I don't know French very well. If I can find the top of this thing, this here is a fleece blanket that is really, really comfortable. Check this out. I'm just gonna wear this thing like a cape. There you go. So yeah, this fleece blanket is it's really comfortable. Now, I did not realize when I designed this item that the Earth would be, I mean that the yin-yang planets would be so enormous. But whoopsie. Yeah. Anyway. It's very comfortable. My daughter actually stole this and was using it in her room. I had to steal it back from her so that I could show you. Additionally, we've got a stainless steel water flask. Now, white was the only background available for this item. Now, what I have not tried, and what I might try, is wrapping the black background with the stars that I have on some of the other products around this to see how it looks. But yeah, it's really good construction. Basically, everything from Teespring is quite well made. I've actually been very pleased and impressed with the quality of their stuff. You know, wherever they're sourcing their products from, it's really well made. It's got a screw on top that fits really securely, so your water won't slosh around. And it's interesting. You can see some of the machining on the bottom of the flask. And finally, you may recall my old Yin Yang Planets travel mug, but that was actually a custom creation from my mom, who knew that, you know, who made it for me, because she's very crafty. She makes things, and so she actually made that mug for me. But now they're available in the Raw Space store. This is a stainless steel travel mug with the Yin Yang Planets and star background wrapped around. It wraps around so seamlessly you can't even tell where the image seam is. And this is awesome. I love this. It's very bright and big, and the lid that it comes with is it's one of these slidey lids that pulls back. So I haven't used it yet. I literally just opened the box earlier today. I noticed it out in the mailbox, but it feels like it would seal quite well and not leak. But yeah, so that's show and tell for today. Some cool stuff in the Walmart Raw Space merch shop. All right. Again, It's good stuff. I like using it myself. I'm probably more excited about using the merch than anybody else is, so that's why I mention it, because if any of y'all are interested, it is good stuff. All right. Any more questions? Mark Desire, excellent point. There is water ice on Mars. Yes, there is, which contains hydrogen and oxygen. You get your carbon from the atmosphere, your oxygen from the atmosphere and from the water ice, and your hydrogen from the water ice. You could make methane, you could make oxygen, you could breathe the oxygen, you could make rocket fuel. It's perfect. Because remember, Starship uses what? Methane and oxygen. Amazing. Brilliant. Mark with the answers. Bennu bathrobes. I know. Friday Ray. I don't have any Bennu merchandise yet. I will, I promise. I have some ideas. And if you have any ideas, fire them, send them my way over on Discord, which I will now link. But I don't have any Bennu merch yet. And at Teespring, they don't have bathrobes. They have a yoga mat. And in fact, I think there's a yoga mat in the Walmart Raw Space store, but I didn't order a sample of it. But let's see. Crystalline bacteria, maybe you should have COVID masks made. There are actually masks in the store. You know what? Let me show. Oh, no, I don't want to dwell on merch for too long. Nobody, I don't know. Anyway, follow the link. I'll link it again. Follow the link. Go check out the stuff in the store. You got to scroll down to see all the items. Teespring doesn't make it very easy to sort things very well. You can pin items to the top, specific items, but as far as like creating a natural flow of browsing products or like a hierarchical categories or whatever, it doesn't really do that. But in any case, go to the store and see what is on offer. I do have Yin Yang Planets masks in the store. I just didn't order a sample of one because I couldn't order everything. I mean, I spent a couple $100 on samples. I didn't want to spend thousands. Okay, so does this blanket have a tag somewhere? Somebody in the chat mentioned wearing plastic, and this is a fleece blanket, so whatever fleece blankets are made of, I presume it's mostly cotton. I don't know. Oh, here. What does it say? Nope, it is 100% polyester, so I guess it is made of plastic, but it's very soft and comfortable plastic, so there you go. But if you don't like fleece, then maybe a fleece blanket isn't the best product for you. I like fleece, and so do my daughters. All right. Looking for more questions. Operators are standing by. What's yoga? I don't know, it's that thing I don't do that I should to help my back. Cat dishes, crystallina bacteria, cat dishes with Bennu on them. I don't think they offer dishes either. Now, I do own a raw space related domain name. I don't remember exactly what it is. Actually, I've got maybe it's rawspace.net or something. I own the domain. I haven't done anything with it. But I could potentially have a hybrid merch storefront where it has links to stuff that's offered through Teespring, which is the YouTube partnered merch provider, as well as other sources. If there were products that like other products that I wanted to offer that Teespring didn't have, like from, I don't know, whoever makes merch. But anyway, that would be a project for a future day. All right. Looks like that's all the useful questions for today. Now, I did want to say one more thing. I've been using a word incorrectly. And I wanted to fess up to that because I think that, well, I mean, I take pride in my speech, and I think that we should all take pride in how we communicate, and try to do so accurately. So I try to say things that I mean and mean what I say. And the word I've been misusing is precocious. I have been for a long time saying that Bennu is very precocious. What precocious actually means is early in development, or exhibiting mature qualities at an early age. Like, when I say that Bennu is precocious, I don't mean that he's a talented and gifted young cat, or that he needs to be in an accelerated learning program. What I mean is that he's mischievous, and so that would probably be a better word to describe what I meant when I used the word precocious, is that Bennu is mischievous. He gets himself into trouble. And it's not like bad trouble, but he's if Bennu had a patron deity, it would be Loki for sure. So, but anyway, I just wanted to clarify that because I think it's important to use words correctly. So precocious means developed early, basically. All right. So that will wrap it up for this week. Thank you all, the remaining folks who have stuck around this far. And I hope to see you in... Now, I don't know if there will be a live stream for the annular eclipse on excuse me, throat. The annular eclipse on Thursday. But if there is a live stream, I'll make sure to bring it to you. One other personal note, despite the precautions that we've all taken this past year and a quarter, COVID has actually reached my household. So I am fully vaccinated as of early April. I've been vaccinated, or late April, but so I received both shots of the Pfizer vaccine. But both my kids received their first dose. They hadn't yet received their second dose, and one of my girls had a sleepover with a friend whose whole family caught COVID, and unfortunately it passed to my daughter. Now, she's asymptomatic. She hasn't been feeling sick, particularly more than usual, but yeah, she did test positive, and even though my other daughter and I tested negative, because of the positive test result, certain wheels start spinning. I started getting texts and phone calls from the county government, the medical people, with instructions on, how we need to quarantine, et cetera, as well as their second dose of the vaccine has been pushed out, at least by a few days, because they were scheduled to receive their shot during their quarantine period. But I don't need to quarantine because I'm fully vaccinated, but I still need to exercise caution so as to minimize my exposure to my own kids, which sucks. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. So if you have access to the vaccine, get vaccinated, for Pete's sake, and don't engage in risky behavior that you don't absolutely have to. And, wear masks and mitigate this the spread of this stupid thing as best we can, because it's gone on for long enough, damn it. Which is a good segue back to I do have masks available in the merch store with Yin Yang planets on them if you're interested. But anyway, so goodbye for now. Thank you for coming. Keep it raw, and carry on, folks.